we're live now.
Welcome everyone. We'll begin the meeting by acknowledging the continuing connection of Aboriginal people to country, culture and community, including traditional custodians of this land, the Wadandi and Kaniang people of the Noongar Nation, paying respects to elders past and present. We'll declare the meeting open at 5 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded in accordance with Council Policy EMCP2. Members of the public are reminded that no other visual or audio recording of this meeting by any other means is allowed without the permission of the chairperson. While every endeavour has been made to only record those who are actively participating in the meeting, loud comments or noises may also be picked up on the recording. Agenda briefings are open to the public to attend and observe. However, any questions, deputations or petitions will be presented at the ordinary council meeting next week. There will be no debate-style discussion, as this needs to take place at the ordinary council meeting when the issue is set for decision. Attending this evening, I'm Vivian McCarthy. We have a couple of vacant seats there, probably timing. We have Councillor Grant Patrick though, we have Councillor Anita Lindeman, Councillor Anne Mitchell and Councillor Alexis Davey. Councillor Deanna Shand has given her apologies for meeting, as has Councillor Glover. Oh, yeah. Staff present this evening, Lauren Clifford, Acting Director Finance and Corporate, Michelle Dennis, Manager Development Services, Ross Marshall, Director of Operations, Samantha Farquhar, Administration Officer for Corporate Services, Stephanie's not here tonight? No, okay. Thank you. Oh. We also have here CEO Nick O'Connor, and my apologies. You're genuinely not on this list.
No, I think Jai President, this staff present is actually foreshadowing the attendance at the OCM, so that's where we get, yeah, not your fault, because we have a foot in both camps when it comes to this agenda.
Right.
So, yep.
But you're definitely here, right? Welcome to everybody who's participating via live stream, and to those in the public gallery. Welcome. And as we noted, Councillor Shand has given her apology for the meeting, and Councillor Glover has an approved leave of absence for the ordinary council meeting and this meeting. We have at item 2.3, applications for leave of absence. At the ordinary council meeting, Councillor Davey will be applying for a leave of absence. And we have no announcements to go through at the agenda briefing, which brings us to item 4, declarations of interest. Division 6, Subdivision 1 of the Local Government Act 1995 states that care should be taken by all councillors, committee members and staff to ensure that a financial or impartiality interest is declared, and that they refrain from voting on any matter which is considered to come in within the ambit of the Act. Do councillors have any declarations of interest for the agenda briefing? We can move through items 5.1, 5.2, 6.1 and 6.2, as these are not applicable to the agenda briefing. At item 6.3, in deputations, I note that at the OCM, John Fry will present a deputation on group valuations. And at item 6.4, under delegates' reports, Councillor Davey will present her report on her attendance at the Walga Aboriginal Engagement Forum that was held on Wednesday, 20th of March at the State Reception Centre, Cartergarup or Kings Park. Moving on to item 7, confirmation of minutes. At 7.1, the ordinary council meeting held on 26th of March 25, we're being asked to confirm these minutes are true and correct. Do councillors have any questions? And we're being asked to receive the reports of committees. At 8.1, we have the minutes of the Warren Blackwood Alliance of Councils meeting held on the 28th of January. Do councillors have any questions? And at 8.2, District Emergency Management Committee meeting held on the 18th of March. Do councillors have any questions? Moving on to item 9, reports of officers, and at 9.1, Director of Operations, we have a number of reports. The first is 9.1.1, an application for subdivision of lot 142 Bridge Street in Donnybrook. And as we move into these items, I'd just like to say that we have had a number of questions through the Councillor DL portal that our Manager Development Services, Michelle, has, I don't know how you turned those around in one day, Michelle, but there was a lot of questions from councillors, and they have all been replied to all councillors through the councillor portal, so we don't need to read those out tonight. So at item 9.1.1, would you like to introduce this report? Roscoe.
Thank you, Madam President. Through the Chair. I thought it would be good to, because there's a bit of history with this one, and there's some councillors in the room that will probably know the history greater than myself. So the report is, the subject matter of this report could be considered contentious by the community, so that's why it's been brought here on face value. The primary reason, and this is the primary reason we brought it to council. However, the item should be viewed as procedural and actually following what we understand to be council's true intentions. The background for this item is obviously detailed in the report. In summary, in April 2020, council resolved to transfer title for Bridge Street property to Bunbury Housing Association Incorporated, with the understanding that the land would only be transferred once the development of aged housing has reached practical completion. The deed of novation for the land transaction and project funding, that was via royalties for regions, included a clause for the Shire to have the first right of purchase of this land should the current owner sell. As I mentioned, I'd invite the long-standing councillors to say otherwise, but hopefully it's safe to assume that this caveat was placed to safeguard the delivery of aged housing, which has now been provided and, from what I understand, is fully occupied by aged persons. You'll note that the applicant stated the purpose of the strata title application is to gain additional borrowing capacity to finance additional housing initiatives. They've also indicated that it is not for the purpose of creating separate lots for sale. So my understanding is the equity will be leveraged for additional housing projects, which is pretty typical for these associations. Notwithstanding the above, the council, if they wish to retain the option to purchase, the existing caveat that references the deed of novation will need to be lifted from the parent lot, and then new caveats placed on the strata titles for all dwellings. From memory, there's 12. Given council's work towards asset optimisation and the significant number of aged persons units it currently manages, as well as current landowners' position within the community housing sector, and protections within the actual development approval for these dwellings to be used for aged housing, it's recommended that council relinquish its option over the land and maintain the easement, however, maintain the easement for access to the foreshore.
Thank you, Director of Operations. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Lindeman.
I think the way to move this into a question, did you find out the actual land value at the time that it was transferred? Because I believe that might have been a question.
There was a valuation completed at the time, yes. What that is, I couldn't tell you on hand. I'm happy to take that on notice if you like, but I know there was a valuation.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell, no? Okay. If there are no other... Oh, Councillor Lindeman.
Also trying to think of a way to put this into a question that helps give a bit more background when you talk of the contentiousness of the time. Negotiating a 15-year span was somewhat a way to appease the giving away of assets at the time. But I don't believe, or do you believe, that that is necessarily the situation of today?
Thank you, Councillor Lindeman. Well done. Director of Operations.
Through the Chair, thank you very much, Councillor Lindeman, for that question. My understanding is what I sort of said before, is that the whole outcome that was planned for was for the delivery of aged care housing, which has been achieved. So hopefully that answers your question.
Any other questions? Moving on to 9.1.2. Roscoe, I believe you're asking the Manager, Development Services, Michelle, to come up and introduce this report.
Yeah, through the Chair, if you don't mind, obviously 9.1.2, and not to jump ahead, but the next item as well, very similar in nature, if not the same.
Would you like us, councillors, are you happy to group the two in the discussion, in the questions? Is it? Yes? Okay.
So yeah, if you don't mind, I'll hand over to Manager Development Services.
Thank you, Madam President and councillors. I think a lot of the questions that are coming through are around more the lot size and alternative toilets. So I think everything I talk to you guys about always starts with there's rules for everything, and there's definitely rules for on-site effluent disposal. So in Western Australia, systems have to first been approved for use by the State Health Department before we can actually consider them for use as individual applications. In the case of both of these properties, because they're grouped dwellings, under the treatment of sewage regulations, local government does not have delegated authority to actually determine applications for on-site effluent. It has to be determined by the Department of Health. So any resultant application for either of these lots will end up going to the department, which adds a little bit extra confidence, I guess, that the systems are going to be appropriate. And the officer recommendation is that composting toilets aren't supported, and that's mainly to do with the amount of humus, they call it, waste that can be generated, mainly because these each of these dwellings is proposed to have 2 of these toilets in it. So as far as alternative toilets goes, from an officer level, we would be recommending the incinerating toilet over a composting toilet, but ultimately it's up to the Department of Health to make that determination.
Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Lindeman.
You mentioned the composting, the incinerating toilets. Is the client happy to install those because they're substantially more expensive when you put 2 of those into each cabin?
That was one of the options in the original plans, so it would be up to the applicant to sort of, identify or demonstrate that the site's suitable for any alternate. But technically it could be considered, but we're suggesting that because there's going to be 3 of these houses on each of these lots and 6 toilets, that we'd prefer something that produces less residual material. I don't know how to say it in a nice way. Sorry. Waste, yes, waste material.
Could I also ask, I mean, I read it, but I may have missed somewhere. It's not subdividing the block at all. It's a group dwelling of that number. So if that was to be sold, it would have to be sold as a group dwelling, not individual homes on the property.
Yes, that's currently the case, but what we find with a lot of these grouped housing developments is that they start out being a grouped housing development, and then as part of leveraging additional funding for other opportunities, or because the banks won't allow them to necessarily get the full amount of the loan, often they end up being built stratas or strata titles before they're actually developed. So while we might approve it as a group dwelling today, there's every chance that they will be subdivided subdivided in the term of it could become a strata subdivision, which is another form of subdivision than green title. Yes, which would then allow them to be sold as individual strata lots within the parent lot.
Okay, so my question is, why would you not just apply for strata initially?
Thank you, councillor Lindemann.
Through the chair, sorry.
I'm not sure why, councillor. It's an applicant's, I think it's initially people use the group dwelling route as an option first because that then provides a justification for subdivision to a certain extent at the next stage. Because it's a discretionary use as well, group dwellings aren't a permitted use in that particular area of town. So I guess this provides a bit more confidence moving forward that they could develop, because they've still got 2 years to build these. There's a 2-year period. So there could be potential that we could end up with a strata application, vacant strata or built strata later on. So there are those options available. But at the moment, the lot sizes are also within the group government sewerage policy. The recommendation is for at least 1,000 square metres, and that's to build some redundancy in. So if future resident moves in and doesn't like the use of those alternative toilets and just want to flush and forget, then they have the land available to put in not an alternative toilet, but an alternative to the alternative. So a standard toilet with enough space to have the wastewater dealt with on site.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Davey.
I note that we received 2 emails from the proponent with concerns about the conditions. Have any of them been resolved since those emails were sent?
Thank you, councillor Davey.
The latest email that was sent to all councillors, we've responded to that today. The other questions or the concerns raised by the applicant, officers have considered their submission and don't believe they need to be changed.
Thank you, Manager Development Services. CEO, did you want to add any comment there? No? Councillor Davey?
Sorry, just a point of clarification. You said you responded to the most recent email, Saturday's email, but your response, did it resolve any of the issues that were raised?
Did that come to all councillors?
Yes, it did, Madam President.
It's come to all councillors.
The wording of the email suggested that staff, it was pretty derogatory to be fair, so officers have responded to those specific issues that have been identified in there and responded, as best we can with the information that we have and the standards that we're applying to the development application.
Thank you. Councillor Patrick.
Thank you. And look, yeah, thanks, Michelle, for very thorough responses, and particularly that one from Saturday that, probably wasn't great and appropriate the way it was worded, but thanks for your responses to that. My question's just, I guess, for a point of clarification for me. So you've said Department of Health has to ultimately approve the final choice. So if we go through and approve based on your recommendations there, which is for the composting toilet, the incinerating toilet as against the composting toilet. If the Department of Health then doesn't approve, or that is on the approved Department of Health list at the moment, that incinerating toilet, so there's no fear, can they change that recommendation to say, okay, yeah, we'd be happy with the composting toilet? And if so, where does that leave us if we support the recommendations at the moment to go with the incinerating, but Department of Health come back and say, well, we would be happy with the composting? Where does that leave us from a council perspective?
Thank you, Councillor Patrick.
So as part of any septic application, there's a local government report that gets provided to the department, and that's where we would outline this was a council supported or otherwise, like this was a council decision, and that would go on our officer report the local government report back to the department, but ultimately they are the decision maker. So if there's a conflict between the two, potentially the health stuff's older, so I'd suggest that would have precedence. I'd suggest 1974 versus 2005.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
I'm sorry, I wasn't giving you the full attention, but when talking about the subdivisions into equal blocks, if they wanted to, did you say that they were able to put a septic system in, or was it a different type? I'm sorry, you just, 5 minutes ago I was trying to manage my IT that wasn't manageable. Did you say that they could have a septic system or not? Did I hear that incorrectly?
Thank you, councillor. So the answer was with 1,000 square metres, that's the minimum lot size for subdivision in a non-sewered area. So the idea is that 1,000 square metres provides opportunity to put a conventional septic system or some other form of treatment in there. So I guess just so you're also aware, there's still the grey water to deal with as part of this development application. They've chosen, there's only one commercially available grey water system for use in Western Australia currently. And that approval requires a primary treatment tank, which is effectively a septic tank. What often happens is we get a lot of these applications, and then when the sums are done on the costs, often it ends up being that a conventional system goes in or a secondary treatment goes in anyway, because you're paying for a septic tank anyway. So that could potentially happen as part of the assessment. The applicants tried to suggest that utilising these systems would reduce in less kind of on-site effluent, but you've still got the same amount of people and the same amount of waste. It's just the component that's being dealt with on-site slightly different. So the idea of the 1,000 square metres is it builds in that redundancy if a conventional system had to be installed.
Yeah, if I may, a supplementary question. There was only 700 pages of attachments, so I could have got this wrong as well. However, I do believe I read in somewhere in the attachments, because of the terrain of the land and it's quite low-lying and moist, septic systems wouldn't be viable. Somewhere in there I thought I'd read it.
Thank you, councillor Mitchell. Is that one?
It's not that they wouldn't be viable, there'd just be additional measures that would have to happen. So you can make a septic system or alternative system work anywhere. It just depends on how much soil you want to bring in. There's secondary treatment systems that can have a reduced clearance to groundwater, for example, because they produce a higher quality effluent, if there is such a thing. But a conventional septic system, yes, can be made to work if it's fully inverted. It's just what people are prepared to look at in their backyards. We do have on one of the lots, I can't remember which one, there's a creek line at the back, so that does require some horizontal separation as well as vertical separation, but generally we're looking at vertical separation when we're talking about leach drains. Septic tanks go in anywhere because they're a sealed unit, so they're not actually, they shouldn't be discharging any material out of them that's relying on the leach drains or other form of flatbeds. There's lots of different ways you can get rid of effluent now.
Thank you, I've had experience. So yes, so yeah, thank you.
Thanks, councillor Mitchell. Any further questions? Councillor Lindemann.
Yeah, through the chair. So waste disposal means they would, being one block, would only get 2 bins or 3 bins. Would that be right? And then would they have to purchase extra bins for each individual dwelling, or would they have to share the 3 bins of the 3 dwellings?
Thank you. Good question.
Yeah.
Single property, but they could have purchased other things.
Yeah, sorry, we're just thinking about that. Very good question. So generally, you get a standard system, and if you want an additional system, so from some of our other group dwellings share some, like they have a standard bin arrangement, and then they get additional bins and share them, so that's a reduced cost. If it was a servo strata or an actual strata, then they would each be charged a bin charge separately. But as a group dwelling, they have some options there to share bins if they want to, but if they're going to be rented, often people just get a separate bin for each dwelling so that there's no arguments or disagreements with that's my bin or that one smells worse or those kinds of things, which we get those kinds of requests quite regularly.
Thank you. Councillor Lindemann.
I'm sorry, I have so many questions. Through the chair, just on a rates basis, that is a one block, one lot of rates, unless they strata it?
This is testing my rates knowledge. We've got someone in the room that might be better placed, but it would be, it's in the town site, so it's a, it would be rated on GRV.
Can
Is
we
that a fair?
check with the CEO? Or,
But the valuation would be based on 3 dwellings. So the gross rental valuation would be based on 3 dwellings as opposed to 1 dwelling. So it's improved rather than unimproved in the town site.
thank you. Councillor Lindemann. Councillor Davey.
Sorry, I know I'm asking the same question again, but I'm still not clear. So I found the email where you've explained the responses to us. from the request from the proponent on Saturday, but have you given those responses back to the proponent, and has there been any discussion that's resolved anything?
Thank you, councillor. So the result of us trying to explain where the position we were at has resulted in the email that you got on the Saturday, because the applicant doesn't agree with the officer recommendation. And that's totally their prerogative, but we provide our response to you. To be fair, I don't think there's much value in us providing those responses to the applicant.
No, I don't.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Mitchell.
Do say this is not a question about this agenda item, but considering we've discussed the email from the proponent.
Can we keep it to the...
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
it has to relate to the agenda
Yes,
item.
it is. It's considering the email from the proponent, it was said that it was quite derogative. So therefore, is there a requirement to respond under those circumstances?
That's not a question around
Yep,
the item.
okay,
So
thank you.
I will allow CEO to speak on that, but that's not the topic of this.
Yeah, so noting your introductory remarks, Shire President, I no doubt speak on behalf of the staff. I think there was some quite insulting and defamatory imputations in that email, and I'll be addressing them as the CEO. Yep.
Any further questions? Councillor Lindemann.
Through the chair, can I also ask, the size of the building doesn't class as an auxiliary building, but if it was shrunken down, would they be auxiliary buildings, and therefore would you have 3 auxiliary buildings? No need, basically, almost for any approval other than meeting building requirements.
Thank you, Councillor Lindemann.
You guys have some tricky questions when the planner's not here. So ancillary dwellings, which I think is what you're referring to, they have to be ancillary to something else. So the first one could be a single dwelling, and then one could potentially be ancillary, but that's not what the applicant has applied for. I'm not sure of the size.
Class 1 and 10A.
No, ancillary dwelling is just a granny flat, sorry. Ancillary is what we used to call granny flats. Yeah, size-wise, there's no minimum size anymore. The previous applications that have been dealt with from this applicant, they've requested consideration under there's some density bonuses, I guess, if you like, under the R codes for single bedroom dwellings. These are not that. Size-wise, are they more than 100 square metres? I'm not sure that they are. 102, so they are technically over the ancillary dwelling size for a residential area, but as I mentioned, you still have to have a single dwelling for something to be ancillary to it. So when we get ancillary dwelling applications before a main dwelling, that's considered as the first dwelling, and then later on when you come and apply for your main dwelling, you need to demonstrate that that first dwelling meets the ancillary, otherwise you haven't got approval. So, sorry, the 100 square metres is what we allow in our rural res and rural zone, but generally it's 70 square metres in a residential area, I think. I can take that on notice. I'll take that on notice. I should say that.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Okay.
If no one else has got any more questions, I just got one more, please.
Councillor Lindemann, one more question.
Thank you.
You can have as many more as you like, actually.
Oh, look, is it necessary for us to know, I think I already know the answer to this, but necessary for us to know the purpose of these buildings? The fact that they're a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom building is quite unusual. Is there any indication that the accommodation that they'll be providing, and for whom possibly?
I didn't catch that last part of your question with the...
Well, it's an unusual combination, a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom building. So my question is, the possible use of those examples may be a care, I don't know. No, I'm not going to give you examples. I'm just asking if there's any indication of a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, the use...
The purpose.
Purpose, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. there's no requirement to do that unless they are claiming those exemptions under the residential design, not exemptions. What's the right word? It's not an exemption. Concessions, thank you, CEO. Unless they're claiming their concessions under the like aged and dependent or single bedroom dwellings. We are finding with housing affordability and those sorts of things that it could potentially, at the time when they apply for the building permit, it might end up being that these are a 1B rather than a 1A, which means multi-occupancy. But it doesn't sort of change how we would deal with it from a planning perspective first with the group dwelling considerations.
Thank
Although
you.
that was a submission from one of the concerns from a nearby resident was the presumption that they might be mining accommodation, but we don't ask for that, and they don't need to provide that.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Mitchell? Okay. We'll move on to item 9.1.4, also toilets. Development application P25018, Yabberup Hall Universal Access Toilet Addition. And that will be happening, or the application is for 5 Yabberup Road, Yabberup. And Director of Operations, are you going to introduce this report?
Through the Chair, thank you, Madam President. I think it's straightforward, and to be honest, it's one of these things that really irks me, that we have to go and get planning approval for a toilet on a reserve. But we're doing the right thing. We're leading by example. So it is purely just approval for universal access toilet for the Yabberup Hall Association. That's been, to be honest, a long time coming. So we're just trying to show some leadership. So I see this as being procedural.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Lindemann.
Obviously for our disability access program, this is awesome. However, my question is, will this show up as an increase in our assets, on our asset register?
Thank you. Yes, it will. I've got Stuart nodding behind you. Will that just increase the value of the existing asset or a separate asset? Yeah, it will increase the value of the existing asset. Any further questions? Okay, item 9.1.5, the Bliss Festival 2025 event application. And I believe Director of Operations, Roscoe, you'll be introducing this report.
Thank you, Madam President. I thought it would be a good idea because obviously this has sort of come through a few times. I'll just do a bit of history. So the original application for the event was to be held over the January long weekend, and I'll call that event date 1, with the request of 500 patrons was presented to Council in November and was refused. However, Council encouraged the applicant to consider an event at the premises outside of the Shire's high threat period. And for everyone's benefit, the high threat period is 1 December to 31 March. On behalf of the applicant, the landowner referred the matter to the SAT. SAT invited the Council to reconsider the decision prior to a date that was set as 3 February. Accordingly, we brought that to the January special council meeting. So the applicant submitted a revised application with a new date for the event, which was then proposed to be over the March long weekend, event date 2. This application, as I said, was presented to Council for consideration at the special council meeting on 29 January 2025. Minutes from the special council meeting recorded that during the deputation, Mr Tennecook advised it was likely that the event would need to be postponed again and to possibly a date in December 2025, January 2026. Most importantly, and of note, and I think this is really the crux of the issue, importantly, Mr Tennecook had stated that the event would not be financially viable for them with fewer patrons than 500. At the meeting, at the special council meeting, Council debated an amendment from 350 patrons to 500. That amendment was lost. SAT conducted a mediation at a further hearing on 7 February. with the applicant agreeing to submit a completed application. This was received by the officers 28th of February, with a revised date for the event being 30 December and a duration to 2 January 2026, event date 3. Noting that this proposed date is again within the high threat period, but also during the Christmas New Year period. At the special council meeting in January, the presiding member requested clarification from myself as to the rationale regarding the number of patrons proposed and the associated risk consideration. At this meeting, I acknowledged the differences of opinion regarding the bushfire risk at this site. The report presented then and the same extracts represented today have considered experience-based advice from the Shire's Community Emergency Services Manager, the appointed Chief Bushfire Control Officer, our local brigade captains, and the DEFIS District Officer, all concluding that in the event of an emergency in that location, given our resources and our experience, we would limit patrons to 350. Other risks are considered in the report, such as noise, ablutions, water activities and associated water health risks, including potable water, that are conditioned accordingly. The officer's recommendation is provided for council to consider. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Director of Operations. Are there any questions? Councillor Lindemann?
Thank you, through the chair. So the main thing that's been changed again is going back to 350, accepting 350 for this date, for this event. Is that the main change at all?
Thank you, Councillor Lindemann.
Through the chair, we haven't actually changed. We've maintained 350. But like, to be fair to the applicant, their beef is they need 500, in their words, to be financially viable.
Thank you. Councillor Patrick.
Sorry, and thank you. Just on that point, so to clarify, the applicant is still requesting 500. The officer's recommendation is 350 still. Yep. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Davey.
My apologies, I wasn't at the January meeting, but my recollection from the November meeting where we considered the original application was that this site could not be defended and be safely, I guess the event could not be safely held from a fire risk perspective. It seems like the CESM has changed their opinion of the event now. So what has changed with respect to fire management?
I think...
Through the chair. Oh, sorry,
Which way are we
CEO, if you
going?
want to...
CEO?
So as part of the, through the chair, so as part of that, the first SAT hearing, there was an undertaking given that over the Christmas period that would undertake a site visit, a detailed site visit, and myself and the CESM and the applicants and the applicant's fire control consultant attended the site, and on the basis of that, then that's where it's been revised.
The number has been revised.
Yep.
Yep.
And then did you want to add to that?
Director, oh, sorry.
So, do you mind if we just conference?
No.
I think that's good through the chair. So, Madam, through the chair,
Yes.
Sorry. So between November and January, the difference has been that the applicant has engaged an independent fire consultant who's done a site-specific assessment of the site, and with the landowner committed to doing a number of things. So they improved access. They did quite a lot actually in relation to their fire breaks. But notwithstanding that, from an officer perspective, the site is considered to be constrained, not necessarily the risk of a fire happening on the site, but how that site will be impacted by the high risk vegetation around it, which the applicant doesn't have any control over. And that's where, I guess, the level of comfort, if you want to describe it as that, from a firefighting or evacuation perspective, as well as there's a bit of refuge on site with there's a tea room kind of building and irrigated lawns, that was identified if there had to be some sort of refuge on site, that 350 was the number that was considered appropriate for that particular location. So SAT asked us to see how we could enable an event to occur at that particular site, whether it be a different time of the year or reduction in numbers, and that's where we got to following the site visit and the additional commitments made by the applicant through their independent fire consultant, who's going to actually bring in a fair bit of resources. That will be in addition to anything that's provided through our response processes.
Thank you. And Councillor Patrick?
Thank you. Just to continue for that, so I did have a bit of a look through, but I couldn't clearly find it. Has anything changed in that the role of the proponent and the fire support services that they bring in would be to conduct an evacuation in the event of a fire, not to fight a fire? Is that correct? Yep.
Thank you, Councillor. Was that a yes? Yeah. Okay. Any further questions?
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Sorry. And the other thing that they were committing to is in the event of a total fire ban or a harvest movement ban, they were hoping to leverage that on-site resources to enable vehicle movements, for example, which would normally be prohibited on those particular days. So that's what they were sort of committing to, that if that was to occur, that they would then apply for an exemption on the basis of the gear that they've got on site. So it's not necessarily, well, if a fire did break out, they'd be there as well, but to also kind of manage the risks on site.
Thank you. Councillor Lindemann?
So just to be clear, those changes are now having you recommend that this event is able to go ahead. The recommendation is for it to be approved.
I think it's the recommendation is approved at a lower number of people. Is that correct, Director of Operations?
Yeah, it's exactly it, Madam President.
I have a question. Comparatively, the fire officer who's prepared the report, are those qualifications, I don't understand how the structure of fire consultants is, but what's the accreditation? I guess I'm used to accounting accreditations or professional accreditations. How do you rank like the Chief Bushfire Control Officer that we rely heavily on and has the local experience? How do you compare consultant knowledge with that?
Thank you, Madam President. That advice has been, will be sought by the applicant, and it's on a commercial basis. Obviously, we could have gone and actually hired a consultant ourselves to do the same thing for this site. However, we've called upon our resources that we have through DFIS, through the joint venture for our CESM, through our Chief Fire Control Officer. So the experience of one individual is certainly recognised, and I'm certainly not saying they're not experienced, but the combined experience of the individuals that we've consulted is well over 100 years, and certainly, in my humble opinion, holds a lot more weight.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors?
Can I just clarify?
CEO?
Just through the chair, just to clarify, the original numbers that staff were comfortable with was 200, is that correct from the beginning? No? It's always been 350?
So our original recommendation before they employed their consultant was refusal, and the number that was landed upon, or don't know what the right word is, determined to be appropriate for the site was 350, and that's been the same in all of the reports that we've provided that recommend conditional approval.
Thank you. Councillor Lindemann?
This could possibly affect things in that how many other applications do we have for this date, assuming that last year we had an event in the area at the same time as this proposed one, and there may possibly be another. So is that of any impact or first in best dressed?
Did you understand?
Madam
Thank you,
President,
Director
if
of
I may,
Operations.
through the
From a
chair,
fire resources, fighting perspective.
we are aware of another application for the same period of time. However, can I reiterate that we look at each application case by case? So,
Any further questions? Okay, we'll move on to item 9.1.6, development application P24067, Pine Plantation, Hay and Bathcote Roads at Southampton. And we will take, councillors will take questions on notice and the Director of Operations will come back to you. Any questions? Councillor Davey.
Could I just get a little bit more context around why they didn't initially apply, why it's a retrospective approval?
Okay, thank you.
I can answer that question. So in our town planning scheme, plantation use is a permitted use, but the works component's what needs development approval because it's within a special control area, and the applicant didn't consider that that was necessary. But they were well prepared to provide a retrospective application, and we didn't have to do any enforcement action.
Councillor Lindemann.
Could I ask how old these radiata pines are?
Thank you.
Maybe 3 months. So
Just
the
babies.
yeah, so the works triggered a customer complaint. That's how we found out about it, and that then has resulted in a retrospective application being applied for.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
I've got two questions and I'm not sure whether one of them is covered in the attachments that I haven't got all the way through yet. But what size is the water tank they're suggesting is reliable for firefighting? Is it located within the plantation?
Thank you. On
We'll
notice, or-
take that on notice if that's okay.
And the second?
This was one on clearing. I noticed discussion around there may be the use of an exemption for asset protection zones. Is the plantation itself regarded as an asset?
Thank you.
So asset protection zones are normally related to a habitable dwelling, and so the DFES comment that was provided in response to the application that was referred to them, the original plan shows the homestead on that site, but that's subsequently been demolished. So there are no habitable dwellings on this particular property. So no, the plantations are an asset, but I will take it on notice as far as whether or not it covers that.
under that,
But in the officer report and the comments in response to the DFS comments, it's sort of been discounted by the planning officers because there's no habitable structures left on site.
My question, if the application had been submitted beforehand, would the asset have been protected? Would the homestead have been protected? Is that what this means?
It's more around fire protection of existing assets in your fire management plan, but because there is no house there anymore, so DFES were mainly responding to that asset protection zone around the house, which is, yes, deemed not suitable. I don't think the house they've sold, it's been relocated off site, but I don't think it was suitable for anybody else. By the sounds of it, it was in pretty terrible condition. So as far as would they have kept it if they'd lodged a normal application, that wasn't their intent.
Okay. Councillor Lindemann.
Thank you. A little bit ignorant on the plantations. But my understanding is as those pines grow, they need to be thinned out to get the thicker stems, etc. So if they all grow without thinning them out, they really are a fire hazard. So is there anything that's in place that says that they need to be thinned out every so many years, or do people just come in at Christmas time and get some?
Thank you, Councillor Lindemann. Manager Development.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, there's a plantation management plan that talks to what they'll be doing. So after a certain number of years, I think they even take out a whole row of trees. And so any conditions around fire, sometimes they burn those on site, that kind of thing. So any of those sorts of measures need to be done in consultation with their neighbours as part of that plantation management plan and how they'll manage that moving forward. So yes, it's not uncommon that happens. In fact, it's a standard practice in the plantation industry.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, that takes us to the end of the Director of Operations reports. Thank you and well done. The response to questions has been particularly well received.
That's what we're here for.
Yes. Moving on to 9.2, Director of Finance and Corporate. We've got two reports coming up, 9.2.1 and 9.2.2. The first is the schedule of accounts paid as at the 31st of March 2025, and the second is the March monthly financial report. And councillors, once again, will take questions on notice for inclusion for answering before the OCM. So, and also Manager Financial Services, Acting Manager Financial Services, will be in attendance at the OCM. So if you have any questions on, first of all, 9.2.1, we'll take those now. On 9.2.2, the summary of the result for the month is in the deck. So if you need more time to read those, we can have Stephanie at the meeting at the OCM. Okay, item 9.2.3 has been pulled. The appointment to the Warren Blackwood Alliance of Councils, Climate Alliance Reference Group. We'll bring that back next month when we've got some interested parties around the table. Item 9.2.4, to adopt Council Policy ASS/CP2, Asset Management. And CEO, you'll introduce
Just
this
very
report?
briefly, so through the Chair, councillors, this is brought to you tonight as recommendation for some policy improvements as part of the recent Regulation 17 review or audit. It's essentially just some tidying up of some terminology and bringing it into more of a contemporary framework. So happy we've got Stuart here to answer any questions if required.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Davey?
Sorry, are we able to get a marked up version of the old one?
We can provide you
Senior?
with through the Chair, we can provide you a copy of the old one and the new one. You can do a comparison. Given there's substantial changes, it just was starting to get messy to do the markups. Yep. Oh, okay, that is attached. Yeah.
Would you like a summary of the key differences? Would you like to provide a further, some background to the two reports?
Thanks very much, Chair. The primary purpose for the change to the policy was that the old policy prescribed specific positions that no longer exist through subsequent restructures, and as a consequence, there was a loss of responsible officers through that process. So and as well as truncating into more contemporary practices, the CEO described. And the idea was that to put the responsibility back to the CEO, and then the CEO would delegate as part of his responsibilities to the officer, or the officers that he deems to be responsible from time to time to carry out the practices, rather than having that prescribed in a policy that may be required to change through restructures over time.
So easier to maintain. Any questions? Okay, item 9.2.5 is to rescind Council Policy WRKS, I suppose that's works, is it? CP4, Road Use Approval for Restricted Access Vehicles, or RAVs, on Council Road Network, and adopt Council Policy Works CP1, Land Resumption Compensation. And I believe Acting Director of Finance and Corporate, Lauren, you'll be introducing this report.
Yes, thank you. So this change is just required as part of our, it came about just as part of our normal review as per our policies, and it's also been guided by the some more information that was provided as part of the Reg 17 and FMR audit that's been undertaken. So primarily the road use, or the RAVs, is primarily based on what is a administration policy, which is sort of how council should, or the Shire administration will implement or carry out a policy. So it's operational in nature, and there's no reason for it to be a council policy. So as stated in the actual report, it says that the policy itself, as it no longer needs to be a council policy, will still become an administration policy that staff will use and guide that to implement it throughout the organisation. And the amendments made to the land resumption compensation was very minor, as per the council policy on what minor changes are in regards to any council policies. So, yeah, it's just asked that you adopt those changes.
Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Councillor Davey.
So the two policies are in no way related? Okay, can I ask why they're the same item?
Through the chair, just for ease of putting them into the one report. At the time when we were pulling together the report, there was it just bulking them together just purely for less pages in the actual agenda itself.
And I notice it's the same background around them both.
Yeah.
Yep. Any further questions? Okay. Item 9.2.6, Local Government Ordinary Election, October 2025. CEO, you're introducing this report?
So very briefly, this is a procedural matter. I think we foreshadowed this a number of meetings ago, but we're just waiting on the formal or updated cost estimates from the Western Australian Electoral Commission. So I'll just hand over to Mrs. Clifford to amplify my introductory remarks.
Thank you, through the chair. So yeah, as stated earlier, we have now received the cost estimate from the WAEC, which is $38,307 to provide the to conduct the actual ordinary election. We had received an email from a councillor today in regards to who would do the election. So the Local Government Act allows for the local government to hold the election themselves, or to conduct have the WAEC conduct the election on our behalf. Obviously, we have to pay them for that. So the recommendation is to allow the WAEC, or to decide to have the WAEC conduct the elections and to have it as a postal vote.
Thank you.
Just a
CEO,
quick-
would you like to expand?
Probably just a quick question there of Mrs. Clifford, but I would have thought it would be a fairly standard process for the Electoral Commission to run most, if not all,
Yes,
local
that's
government
correct.
elections throughout WA. That's certainly the
Yes.
practice in other states I've worked out. Yep.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Davey.
So is it cheaper to have an in-person election, but you just get less turnout, so it's less representative of people's wishes?
Cheaper to have your own election? Is that what you're asking?
No.
Sorry.
Is it cheaper to have it in-person, not postal?
Oh, okay, sorry. Acting Director, Lauren?
I'd have to take that on notice. I haven't got any stats on that with regards to how much that would cost. I think just the turnout and the response in the past has been better through the postal vote versus having it in person.
Thank you. Any further questions? Moving on to item 9.2.7, the annual review of asset management plans and financial informing plans 2025-2026. And CEO will introduce the report.
I was actually taken on notice. Any questions? Did you have anything to introduce?
I'm
I'll
getting your
introduce.
title. Financial Project Manager.
Good
Is
enough.
that-
Good
That's
enough.
good enough?
Close enough.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thanks very much, Chair. This report that's been presented to Council at the next OCM is the annual review of Council's financial informing plans, and these are a suite of documents that cast the view into the long term for Council to understand its long-term obligations, particularly around asset management. And these will then be fed through to the long-term financial plan, which will come to Council. The intention is to come to the May OCM, and that will then allow staff and council to form a holistic view of what its longer term obligations are compared to its current budget structure. But this is an annual process, and it's done annually to ensure that the plans are updated with contemporary information and forms part of the integrated financial planning obligations that local government's required to undertake. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. And thank you for the work that's gone into this as well. And as for last year, the clarity of the information, I've really appreciated. Councillors, do you have any questions? No? I think we've covered this as well in our workshop. Yes, yep. Okay, councillors, we'll move on to 9.2.8, which has been pulled and put forward to the next OCM in May. Under 9.3, we have no reports from the Chief Executive Officer. Well done. And item 10, no reports from elected members. Item 11, no reports of no new business of an urgent nature. And we move into items under item 12, which is meetings closed to the public and matters for which the meeting may be closed. We will need to close the meeting if councillors have any questions on these reports. Do you have any questions, councillors, on these reports? No? Okay. So we don't need to close. You can stay where you are in the gallery there. And moving on to 12.2, public reading of resolutions that may be made public. We'll do that at the OCM. And item 13, closure. I'll advise that the next ordinary council meeting will be held on the 23rd of April 2025 at 5 p.m. in these rooms, the Donnybrook Balingup Council Chambers. And we'll declare the meeting closed at 6:01 p.m.